I'm very excited this morning. Last week, I got to go to a conference where we got to learn more about children's ministry. We were in Atlanta. It was myself, it was Emily, our children's director, and 4 wonderful parents and volunteers in our children's ministry. And it's really fun to go to conferences that are well done. I don't know how many of you have ever been to work conferences, but you know, there's some really bad ones, right? That just are a drag and a waste of time. And you're thinking, my God, at least they're buying me lunch. That's the only redeeming part of this conference. But this was not one of those conferences, at least not for me. It was really exciting to talk about the future, to talk about visions of what could be in the life of children's ministry at Trinity Church, to see how we could grow this ever-growing ministry. Around 2 years ago, we averaged 3 or 4 kids per Sunday. By the way, 2 of those were kids who belonged to staff members, okay? We're pushing numbers in excess of 15 and 20 kids per week, and we're now having to talk about the need of expanding a program. So it was really exciting that we go from such meager beginnings to now going to Atlanta to a conference for the curriculum group that does our children's curriculum every week, to learn more about how we can grow this wonderful ministry of the church. It just filled me with this sense of hope. And I think it did for me in particular for a couple of reasons. One is, sometimes I get so busy working that I forget there is a need we all have to sort of step away from the everyday routine and to kind of be filled again with a sense of hope for what could be. I get so wrapped up in the daily doings around the church, all the weekly tasks we have to do, the monthly needs. Sometimes it's good to sort of step back and take a longer vision of, what could we be in a year? What could we be in 5 years? It's kind of exciting. It makes the weekly and daily stuff not so mundane, It gives you a little goal and something to work for, some hope. But the other reason I think that this conference was especially good for me is it's coming on the tail end of a summer. And you've heard me mention this before, and we'll keep talking about this here and there over the coming months as things unfold. But there's a lot of anxiety right now around the future of the United Methodist Church. There's a general conference coming in February, and we're going to be making big decisions and, all these things about the future of the church. And I got to be honest, this summer for me has been a summer where all of that anxiety has just reached a fever pitch. Like, everyone's just so in a tizzy. What are we going to do? What are we going to be? What if this plan wins or that plan? Or what if I don't agree with what they decide? And it's just denominational. For those who don't know, I got a couple preachers in the room who will maybe shout amen if I'm not careful. Denominational politics can be one of the most life-draining, life-sucking things there is. I'm just going to be honest with you. So you can imagine my excitement, okay, over going to a conference on something as seemingly simple as children's ministry. To be reminded that beyond all the muck of denominational politics, there is a vision and a hope for something that really matters. That we can be in ministry with the next generation through the life of the church. So this tension between what is and what could be. Parker Palmer, the great writer, says that tension between what is and what could be is the duty we all have to stand, he says, in the tragic gap. To stand in the tragic gap. Because often what is, we know, is not what it should be. And what could be is the hope we have. And that hope is not just a blind or empty hope, but it's a hope that we have because we know that through the power of the living Christ, that things can be better, redeemed, or in the process of being redeemed. But so often we find ourselves right in between, don't we? Between what is and what could be. To stand in the tragic gap, Parker Palmer says. I think that captures the spirit of what James is writing in this second chapter. This standing in the gap. James, you'll remember, was the book that Martin Luther, the great theologian, hated. He did not like James at all. He said James undermined everything Paul had to say about being saved through faith. But James says, no. You can say I'm saved through faith all day, but if you don't have works, what does that salvation even matter? Martin Luther couldn't stand that. John Wesley, I mentioned this last week, John Wesley loved the book of James. For him, it was like this perfect blend almost of being saved, our souls being saved, and yet our bodies being called to good works. James is writing this letter in the early history of the church, and there was a heresy that if it had not already been developing in James's time, it was beginning to develop. And it's a heresy called Gnosticism. That's a big old fancy word, but Gnosticism is simply the belief that your body and soul are two separate things altogether. And the Gnostics believed as long as the soul was okay, you're headed to heaven. It didn't really matter too much what happened with the body. Now, one could say, we kind of understand this if Christians were being persecuted, and what's the noble cause of this persecution, to their bodies, if not their souls being rewarded with heaven. But this is a heresy in the church, because you cannot believe that the body and soul are two separate things. They are always intertwined. The holistic view of the person, body and soul together. This is why Wesley loved James so much, because so much of our Methodist theology and so much of our history and practice of Methodism is really this merger of soul things and body things into a life of faith and discipleship. Now you say Gnosticism, oh, that's fine, whatever, the Gnostics, we don't know anything about that now. But there's a modern Gnosticism the church has to deal with. And that is this notion that the church's only job is to save souls. As long as we get your soul saved, you'll be in the sweet by and by and with Jesus and all this walking pearly through the pearly gates and streets of gold and all those stuff, that the body stuff doesn't matter, that this life doesn't matter. The church has always battled this tension that we'd rather save your soul but not worry too much about transforming your circumstance. We want souls to go to heaven, but we don't worry so much about the conditions of this world. And I would tell you that James would tell us that's modern Gnosticism. What good, James would say, is a saved soul if it doesn't bear fruit in a body and in a life that does good works, that seeks to transform the world, that seeks to put themselves out there in love and service to the world? The kingdom of God is not this future thing that's just out there. I mean, it is, but that's not all of it. God's kingdom is right here, among us, around us, living in and through us. We are being called into the work of this kingdom even now. And so there's no separation of body and soul. James didn't care too much how you got saved. You don't hear him talk too much about that in this whole letter. What he cared most about was, what are you doing with that salvation? What are you doing with that salvation? And for those in this room who would claim, oh, I'm saved, maybe I would ask you the same thing. Good. What are you doing with it? In the daily rhythms of your life, how is that salvation bearing fruit? In good works, in expressions of love and mercy and grace and forgiveness. I mean, it's one thing to come and Sunday morning go through the motions and we sing and we pray and all of this matters. This is just such a lovely room to do it in too, right? But it's that modern Gnosticism that says that's all that matters is what we do here, and then we just go live our lives however we want. As though the soul, the hour for the soul is one thing and then our real life is something different. That's not it at all. Everything we do in the life of worship should inform our everyday lives. How are we joining this notion of saving souls that are being saved with good works, bearing fruit in our lives, blending body and soul every day? Beautiful theme, maybe we get started here. Beautiful theme that James mentions is, did you catch that wonderful word? That maybe the starting point for us in all of this is mercy. Mercy, James says. Pope Francis says that mercy, a little bit of mercy, makes the world a little less cold and a little more just. I don't know about you, but that just washes over me. That mercy makes the world a little less cold and a little more just. So much of our rhythms in daily life in the world are geared around anger and bitterness and my side winning over your side and this and that and the other. But mercy trumps all of it, James says. Mercy washes over all of it. I love the New Revised Standard Version. That's what I read from this morning. And I tried to find a couple other passages, and it kept using this word at the beginning, that when you show favoritism, that's not right. Favoritism is a really nice word, because I think favoritism is like something you don't want to play favorites with your kids, or you don't want to play favorites with friends, or whatever it may be. That's almost too tame of a word. James is describing now he uses the dichotomy of wealthy people and poor people. And when you choose to be with the person who's wealthy at the expense of the one who is poor, then you've shown favoritism. I'd push that a little bit and say there's another word for that. It's called prejudice. Favoritism is almost a little nice. Prejudice is when we choose one group over another and give them preferential treatment. Now, James uses the example of rich and poor. I would argue that's almost too easy. Good, decent church people, we understand that you don't show favoritism to the rich over the poor. Now, we don't always get it right, but at least we would say we agree with that. But what about people who are different skin color? Different ethnicity? Nationality? I don't know. What about people who in the workplace we say, well, a man's always done this, and all of a sudden a woman wants to do it, and we don't really know what to do with that. We show preference because that's what men do, not women. That's prejudice. I've got one. I was talking to a friend last week. One of the most open-minded people I've ever met. Just he would never racist, sexist, xenophobist, none of that, okay? Except I found the one thing. When I started asking him about people who don't agree with his open-mindedness, and all of a sudden, that prejudice came out. And I'm going to tell you something real frank, and I'm probably guilty of this myself. In my life, some of the most open-minded people I've ever met are some of the most prejudiced and closed-minded people toward those who don't agree with their open-mindedness. It's the truth. There is such a thing as being so open-minded, you are closed-minded about it. If you don't believe me, just ask around. I welcome all people, except for that person that doesn't welcome all people. I love everybody, except that person who starts picking and choosing. James would say, no, you don't get to just be with the folks who agree with you. That's prejudice. And here's the kicker. We all suffer from prejudice. There's not a person in this room who is not prejudiced to some degree. None of us. I mean, we may like to think that we're not prejudiced at all. I'm above all of that. Yeah, let me press you hard enough and I'll find the group that you don't like. We all suffer from prejudice at some degree or another. The question is not whether we're prejudiced or not, but whether we will let God's mercy triumph over the inherent prejudice we all carry. Which means actively seeking to look beyond the normal rhythms of our life, the normal viewpoints we have, and try to stretch ourselves to something further. To say that, whatever group it is, are made up of God's children too. That they're good people who claim the name of Jesus Christ in that group too, even if I don't always agree with them. Somewhere along the way, one of the great sins we struggle with, I think, today is that somewhere we have lost the art that we can disagree without becoming disagreeable. It's like you're either disagreeable or there's all or nothing. There's no nuance to saying, well, I disagree with you, but I love you at the end of the day. I might disagree with you on this, but we can find common ground over here. No, we don't do that. We have become a disagreeable people. And I think all of us, in these heightened social and political and, all the banter and the arguing and the, noise around us, maybe we need to take a deep breath and ask, where can God's mercy flow through me? even if it means loving and accepting that person that I don't always like, or that group. Mercy. What little ways could you offer mercy in your life? Even beyond the whole prejudice thing, like even in your daily life. One of the things I'm so excited about, and just in the last couple of weeks, but just various events, I won't go into them now, but just have kind of led me to this place of renewed excitement for what God is busy doing in my life and in the life of this church and in your life and just in general, that this heightened sense that God is at work. And I think God is calling each of you, some of you even to something new, some of you even to something beyond what you already do, to say you could do more. You could offer just a simple act of mercy on an ongoing basis. You could be a person of mercy, not judgment. You could live your salvation so that your faith is not dead because these good works are flowing through you. I want to offer you 3 seemingly simple, through the life of the church, ways. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give you a tangible example. You have plenty of examples beyond these 3, but here are 3 I want to throw out at you. One is, we are in the process of expanding our ministry with Gadsden Elementary. And I'm really excited about this. Our Backpack Buddies ministry is shifting this year. Many of you have done this. You've come to the church and you've packed backpacks, and we get them all packed in crates and then we take them off. But that's shifting. We get food through Second Harvest Food Bank, and they're packaging differently. So there's not a need for people to come to the church anymore, at least this school year, to pack backpacks. But here's a new need that I want to offer you. And I think there's at least a couple people in this room that might be called to do this. Instead of coming to the church and packing bags, we need someone's to go to Gadsden at the end of the week to hand out bags to children. Now here's the cool part about that. One of the quotes we heard this week at our children's conference was this: proximity changes perspective. Proximity changes perspective. If you need to, I want you to flip your GPS over in your bulletin where it says sermon notes and write that down. Proximity changes perspective, which means the closer you get to something, the more likely you are to have your heart changed by it. Maybe God is calling you to give of yourself, even once a month, to go to Gadsden Elementary, Title I school, to hand out bags to kids who have been identified as, we're not really sure, they're at risk. We don't know how much they're going to get to eat that weekend. And so we give them these bags. And maybe that's your calling, to increase your proximity, to maybe learn their names, to see their faces, to look into their eyes, and to have your heart moved. Because, yes, that may not be the most ideal situation they're going home to that weekend. Yes, it may be different than any situation you've ever had to live with. But that heart of compassion that grows inside of you changes your perspective about what you think and what you assume. And maybe even deeper than that, you see in their eyes the eyes of possibility that says, that is a child of God. That is a child with a future. That is a child that God is just doing something with right now. James says, what good is it to say to someone who's hungry, go be filled, enjoy your weekend? Would we ever say to a child who may be short of food, go enjoy, have a good weekend? Or would you feed that child? You have an opportunity, simple as it sounds, to give out backpacks. If you're interested in that, tell me, tell Fran Stanley, tell Bill Stanley. We're looking to get volunteers on Fridays for that. Here's a second one. It's related to Gadsden. I got teachers in the room. You're going to love this one. We are working on creating, and I don't know a better way to say this than some kind of like angel line or something, basically to say to teachers who need supplies, constantly needing supplies, right? What do you need? And whatever it is, we want to help with that. We're going to be putting in the bulletin monthly. Here are the 3 or 4 supplies this month we're collecting. If you turn around and look in the very back, hanging there are 2 blue backpacks, right now full of stuff. I'm so grateful. But hanging right there, and you can bring the supplies that we list in the bulletin, put them in that backpack. Nobody has to see you. And you come sit down and care about your business. And maybe it means budgeting an extra $20 or saying no to something in your life, to spend an extra $20 a week or a month or whatever it is, to buy whatever supply we say we need for these teachers. And even beyond that, supplies for the students. So that no matter what the situation is, teacher or student alike, they can have the dignity to give and receive the education they deserve. I'm passionate about helping teachers because, the reality is public schools are grossly underfunded. Really, they're grossly underfunded. And if Parker Palmer is right about anything in saying that we are called to stand in the tragic gap, it is that the church is called to stand in the tragic gap between a grossly underfunded public school system and what could be a future where all children thrive, where all children have the dignity to receive the education that they deserve, and where teachers who stand on the front lines trying to offer it day in and day out with a sense of hope and purpose, where they have the things that they need to. Keep your eye on the bulletin. Make room in your budget. We need you. These seemingly simple acts, mercy, not judgment. The third is this, and I'll stop with this, I promise. I told you we're expanding our children's ministry. This is so exciting. We're going to be moving over the course of the next couple of weeks from 2 rooms to 3 rooms on the second floor. We've just renovated a 3rd room that's going to be just for babies. We've got babies coming out of our ears at this church. It's so fun. We've got new babies on the way, babies already here, so much so that our toddlers can't get the proper spiritual training that they need because we got baby care. There's a baby on every hip of everybody in the room. And we need somebody to help love those babies. We're going to be building a volunteer system. We've got staff to help teach and help the older kids begin to grow. But we're going to need volunteers who'd be willing to give a Sunday here or there, to rock a baby, to play with a baby. But more than that, to be maybe the very first non-family relationship with that child, to show them what the love of Christ looks like. To love a baby. One of our goals that we've heard at this conference, and I think we want to set long term, is the 5-to-1 goal. That for every 1 child in this church, we want 5 adults beyond their family to have a special relationship, to love and to care for them, to help them grow. Now, that may not be 5 all at once, but over the course of their growing up, at least 5 adults for every 1 child. Invest in them. I loved one of the quotes, and it relates to this James passage and this notion of standing in the tragic gap. How can we live our faith, we heard this past week, in such a way that we know, that how can we live our faith knowing that the next generation is watching us? How can good works flow out of you knowing that the next generation of disciples of Jesus Christ are watching? They're watching here. They're watching at Gadsden. How can you let good works flow out of you? I don't want you to think I'm pitching you some sales pitch on being busy in the church. That's not at all why I want you to do this. In fact, I'd say if you just want to be busy in the church, I got 50 other things you can do. I want you to take one of these 3 opportunities for this reason. Not to support the church, but to serve Christ. And there's a difference. One tends to be a little bit busier. It's good, but busy. But the other gets to the heart of what your life of faith is about. Not just about supporting your local church, but about serving Christ through the life of that church. That in your daily life, you program time to do good works, to let your life of salvation come alive, to let mercy flow through you, so that your life can be a living example of the love and grace of Jesus Christ. Amen. Hey, thanks for watching the latest sermon here at historic Trinity Church in Savannah, Georgia. I'm Reverend Ben Gosden. I'm the senior pastor here at Trinity Church. And I want to take this opportunity to invite you. If you're ever in Savannah, Georgia, we would love for you to visit us on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. We're located on Telfair Square, been here since 1848. Also, you can check out the comments below for a way to give if you feel so led. Again, you're welcome anytime here at Trinity Church.